I'm learning Japanese so you don't have to. Let's talk about how and why I got started. You might be wondering, why would this old guy with gray hair from Canada want to learn Japanese anyways? Isn't it a little late to start learning one of the most difficult languages in the world for native English speakers? To that question, I say no way, because otherwise we wouldn't be talking right now. But also, I think it may be helpful to share how and why I'm learning Japanese for other people out there who are thinking about taking on this kind of challenge. And if you stick around, I'll share some Japanese vocabulary spoken by a native speaker. With that, let's get started. Minasan, konnichiwa. Nihongo dekimasu ka? I've been studying Japanese every day for a little more than a year now. Currently, I'm spending on average 2 hours per day, which in total amounts to around 700 hours. And outside of work and family responsibilities, this is pretty much all I do with my time. You may be asking, why are you wasting all that time? Well, let me tell you a little story. About 8 years ago, I flew to Japan for the first time to travel with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. We spent 2 weeks traveling to different places, including Tokyo, Yokohama, Hiroshima, and then we spent 2 weeks at her parents' house just north of Osaka. The thing was that I couldn't communicate outside of some basic words, like ohayo gozaimasu, arigato gozaimasu, oyasumi nasai, and something kudasai. In other words, I was pretty much unable to communicate with her family and friends, and while her mother could speak a bit of English, it was difficult to communicate anything of significance, and that kind of sucked, and it made me feel like I had to do something about it. After that first experience, we returned 3 more times, and due to my desire to communicate and speak Japanese, I took it upon myself to study Japanese before each trip. First, I tried self-studying a textbook, then I took a Japanese class at the local university, and finally I tried reviewing all my previous notes. And while I made a little bit of progress each time, at the end of the trip, I always felt like I had failed. Even worse, after returning home, I didn't pick up the textbook or return to my studies again until we started talking about booking our next trip. So while I was making some progress, it was incredibly slow and inconsistent. However, during the summer of 2022, I started studying Japanese again, and due to travel restrictions related to entering Japan, we had no trips planned. This time, I started using Anki, something that a friend had been suggesting for a very long time. But I was probably using it wrong because at some point in October, I burned out and had to take a couple of weeks off. The problem was that I was trying to do 2 sets at once, which in part meant I was doing way too many new cards per a day. Benkyou shi sugiru, which means I was studying too much. When I finally started studying again, I had a plan. I was going to stick to 1 set, the one with the audio recordings and the example sentences, and I was going to take it easy on the number of new cards per a day. In the beginning, it took almost an hour and a half to get through all the cards, but now I can do way more in less than 35 minutes on most days. And if you were curious, I am doing the Core 2000 set that I found on the Anki shared decks page, and I'm currently on step 10 of 10. This set is huge. There are around 10,000 cards, which means it's taking way longer than you'd expect it to take to learn 2,000 words. I think if you can find the set with the words and the sample sentences on the same card, it would be a much better use of your time. However, I'm not going to stop because I'm almost done. But what was most important was that I stuck with it, and now I've been doing it every single day for more than a year. And while Anki is introducing me to new words, it's also helping me with my listening skills, as half the cards have sentences with the target words included. I should point out that the single word cards can be difficult at times because there are a fair number of Japanese words that sound kind of similar. In addition, studying with Anki has served as a foundation for my studying. It's the first thing I do every day, in part because I want to keep up my streak, but also because I enjoy doing it. After I finish my words, based on how much time I have, I work on other studying methods. Around the second time I started using Anki, I also started taking lessons once per week with Italki. The first teacher I connected with suggested that I use the Irodori textbooks, which are free, and I will link to them in the description. I made a point of working through the textbook a couple nights a week as time permitted. These days, however, my current sensei, or teacher, is walking me through Genki, which is probably one of the most popular Japanese textbooks. And while some of it may be easy, I'm finding it worthwhile to review the core grammar of the language, as one of my strengths seems to be vocabulary. However, I don't have the grammar to utilize it. During weekdays, I read the 4 articles that NHK Easy News publishes. However, I use the Tudai Easy Japanese app, which I paid for because it has a built-in dictionary and it can translate words and sentences just by highlighting them. Recently, I started using Bunpo, which also means grammar, which is an app on the Apple Store. Again, this is something that I had to pay for, but I think it's probably going to be worth it because it appears to cover all the JLPT usually N5 to N1 levels of grammar. I've also tried a few other apps in the past, including Duolingo and Renshu and Busu, and maybe I can talk more about those apps in another video. And finally, before bed on most nights I read manga. Currently I'm reading Chainsaw Man and I'm on number 11, which is the last one in the first story arc. To be fair, this manga is a little over my skill level, but I still enjoy reading it, even if I don't necessarily understand a lot of what it's being said. Manga o kaimashita. I bought a few of them in Toronto, but they were around $15 each, which is way too expensive. But then I bought a bunch in Japan at a used bookstore for around $2.50 each, so that drove down my average price quite a bit. Given the study plan, when we finally returned to Japan this summer, I had my most successful trip of all. In particular, I remember my sister-in-law telling me, Nihongo ga joutatsu shimashita, which means your Japanese is improving. And while we were in Japan, I traveled a little bit by myself, and I was able to do all the things that I needed to do. Overall, I was a little overwhelmed, but in the end, I felt good about my progress throughout the trip, which was a big change from our previous trips to Japan. And while I talked about the main reason why I'm learning Japanese, there are also a few other reasons worth mentioning. The first is that I've had this dream for a long time that I'd like to move to Japan for a couple of years and try living somewhere else for a change. For now, I'm still trying to figure out how to make that work, but it remains a goal. Another reason why learning Japanese is good for me is that I'm always seeking novel information, and I always need to be learning something new. And with all that's been happening in the last few years, it was vital for me to focus on something different. Put another way, studying Japanese is a way better use of my time than reading about conspiracy theories or whatever else I could find on the internet. And I should also add, learning Japanese has become fun, and that is another big reason why I just keep on doing it. Now that we've covered why and how I'm studying Japanese, let's get into the new vocabulary that was introduced during this video.
皆さん、こんにちは。日本語できますか？おはようございます。ありがとうございます。おやすみなさい。コーヒーください。勉強しすぎる。文法。漫画を買いました。日本語が上達しました。
Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, click that like button and subscribe for more videos like this in the future.